As every month, welcome to the KQL show. Today we have again some news, some stuff we did with KQL, and we have a very special guest, Fabian Bader.
Hey.
So let me bring up the content. Good. So February 2024 already. Time goes fast. And as always, your hosts, Johnny and myself. And the agenda, as usual, a very warm welcome for all those that join live and for all those that watch the video at a later point in time. We have a few updates for you. Then we have Fabian, who will talk a little bit about his daily KQL topics. We'll have something around learning KQL. And last but not least, as always, what did you do with KQL this month? So from a news perspective, I was lucky. I was doing a lot of train riding today, so I could collect some latest news. Yeah, there's yet another book out, Learn KQL in 1 month. It reminded me of year way back, where we had all those Learn PowerShell in a month of links and those sort of things. So now we have a Learn KQL in 1 month, written by Damien, and I briefly read his announcement. So the book is really for those that, he actually explains it in his blog post, but it's really for those that say, okay, I've heard about KQL, but never done it. And actually he wrote the book because he was teaching a colleague and gave his colleague every day a task to solve with KQL. And then he thought, hey, why not write a book about that? The book is basically structured with, logically, a month full of exercises. And here's an example that he's shown also in his blog post. So basically you have a task, you have, the parameters. The book focuses around Sentinel, Intune, I believe, and just standard KQL, so that you can do in log analytics. Some hints in terms of keywords. And then I assume that it's also providing the solution or a more descriptive answer to each of those tasks. Then from our friend Ugur, he has published a repository now that we have device query in Intune. So now, similar as we had already for those that are familiar with Config Manager, where we had CM Pivot, that also had a kind of a, let's call it KQL, reduced version of KQL in CM Pivot. And now we also have device query. And here's a screenshot. Unfortunately, we cannot demo it because I don't have a license in my tenant for that. Great addition. Personally, of course, I really look forward when we can run queries across all devices. Right now, to my knowledge, at least as of today, 27 February 2024, you can only query data from a single device. Nevertheless, definitely useful if you are in a full cloud mode and if you don't have any other possibilities anymore to query the system. It's not per se for just security, because there we have Defender. But if you want to know about disk size, batteries, hardware make, and all the stuff that you want to know as you are managing your devices. Then another hint from Bert-Jan, actually also quite useful. I mean, for those that use KQL every day, I guess part of curiosity is also, to understand, what other data is in there that we can use either for health monitoring, for operational monitoring, for security alerting. So he wrote a query whereby he's basically, going across all the tables. And for those familiar with the security and operational tables, usually you have an action type that actually describes the activity of the event. So let's take you have an action type logon failed or logon success that you would find in the table device logon events. Or if you're looking at the audit log from Entra ID, there you would find all the activities around identities in Entra ID, like password change, etc. And the operational type, the operation you will typically find in the Azure activity type of table, so like VM provisioned, VM stopped, etc. So quite useful to identify maybe events that you weren't aware of that might come in handy. As an example, and I will show that maybe next month, but after I ran this query, I actually noticed, hey, there's actually an event for when E5 customers have used their daily quota. So brackets open, if you happen to be an E5 user and you use Microsoft Sentinel, for each user, you get a 5 megabyte data allowance per day. And once that's used, you get that notification. So quite handy as well if you want to monitor your log ingestion. Then another interesting topic, also accompanied with a blog post. Although I must say, and give me 1 second to refresh my my query in the background, okay, because I'm not yet 100% sure if actually the title of this article is correct, because it mentions device containment. The solution is basically that he's describing in his blog post, and the query here is that when you use Microsoft Defender, you basically have 2 options if you want to get rid, let's call it like that, of a device. So imagine you have a bad device on the network. You have 2 options. If it's a managed device, and after you have gone through the whole thought process, whether you're gonna not make it worse, but you can isolate actually a device. So a managed device means a device that's onboarded in Microsoft Defender for endpoint. By isolating a device, we're basically instructing that device to no longer, communicate in and out. So that's somewhere between the operating system and the Windows firewall, where all connectivity is being cut off, with the exception of one thin line of connection that still goes back to the Defender backend, so that of course we can still unisolate the device and that we can run things like live response. Now, if we have a device on the network that was discovered by a managed device, but it's not onboarded, either because it's not onboarded yet or because it cannot actually be onboarded, think of network devices or IoT devices, then Defender for Endpoint allows us to do a so-called containment of a device. By executing a containment, we cannot do anything on the device itself, obviously, because it's not managed, but we can tell all managed devices to no longer speak to the device or to not accept any communication. So basically, we're sending an instruction out to all devices saying, hey, don't talk to Bob anymore. Now, as I was going through this query and do some fact checking, and I'd like to see things working myself as well, I was wondering whether maybe the title might be wrong, because device containment, that will be something, if we look here what he's doing, he's looking at the registry events where a device gets an instruction. But I tend to believe that this should mean, isolation and not containment. But I'll keep on testing that as we speak in the backend. The block itself, or the solution that is proposed by I have to check if I get his name right, Mikhailos, I think he's from Greece, is that he also built a playbook. So basically that whenever someone does this action, that the device is automatically being tagged, which can be quite helpful because if you are in a rush, if you're really in an incident response process, you might, end up with isolating or containing devices. When you do your cleanup, it might be a little bit easier if you can just filter your devices by a specific tag, rather having to go back into the Defender Action Center to figure out, just in case you haven't made notes yourself, which devices were contained. But yeah, I'll keep on checking in the background, and maybe hopefully by the end of this episode we have it solved, whether this is really about device containment or actually about device isolation.
I'm almost sure that it's the device isolation.
Yeah. My logic also tells me that, because unless, that's why I actually went into the registry to see if it's now telling all other devices specifically if there will be an information about which device has been contained. But I doubt that, because it's only one value that he's storing here. But yeah, I'll keep on checking. Good. Then also for those that use ADX, we just talked about it last night as we were preparing it. We haven't been able to test this out ourselves, unless Johnny has a surprise.
No surprises today.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but
good.
I was also added it, but we'll do it the next time, because I'm thinking you can approach log analytics from ADX. So I also wanted to figure out if you are able to play with log analytics data from ADX.
Yeah.
But it's for now, it's available in ADX. You can play with it. You can replace data in it. So if you have a record with incorrect data, you can modify that specific record instead of deleting and having to re-add it. Mm-hmm. So it's for handling data, it's a really nice feature which was missing in ADX, which they now added.
Cool. Okay, and then we are already getting to our guest. So Fabian, without further ado, I leave it up to you to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very glad that I could join you for the KQLCafe. And yeah, so about me, I work as a cybersecurity architect at Clucania. I'm also a Microsoft Security and Azure MVP. And most of my daily work is around Sentinel and Microsoft Defender. And as many of you who are in the same space will know that on the one hand, we have the UI, but on the other hand, we have KQL. And if I can choose, I will always choose KQL. And yeah, so a few things that came in the last months to me in when I worked with certain stuff like sign-in logs or other information, I created a few little nifty tools and also helpers that I wanted to share with you today. And yeah, I also blog about all of this at cloudbrothers.info. I will share this at the end of my talk again. But maybe let's get straight in. And if there are any questions down the way, please feel free to come off mute. I won't see the chat, I think, all the time, but I will try to have an eye on it. And if I don't see it, Alex, Jenny, feel free to interrupt me there, please.
Sure.
All right, let's get in. So, yeah, I already prepared something. As you can see, I use a function here. This is the unified sign-in logs. I don't know how many of you are working with Sentinel and sign-in logs and non-interactive sign-in logs, but one thing that always bugged me is that there is no good way to combine them both. So this function is what I wrote. Just to show you quick thing what this does. It's mainly just a glorified union between the sign-in events and the non-interactive. Oh, it's AAD non-interactive. Normally, IntelliSense is really good, but with the AAD non-interactive, I don't start with AAD. It never works.
It forgot it.
The problem is when you just do a union with that, then you will have a lot of. Oh, I think it. Oh, I just took one. That's too not enough to show you what I wanted to show you. You will have a lot of duplicate entries in here. Oh no, they cleaned it up. Did they clean it up? Or am I just getting everything from one of those two? Now I have definitely some sign-in events from both. You can see in the category here. But I think they cleaned it up in the background and my function
You
is
still
no
have
longer needed.
the one with string and dynamic, so it's not totally clean.
Oh, yes, I have. Okay, that is exactly what I wanted to show because there is a few things. Like here we have it. So there's the conditional access underscore string. This makes everything you write below this really annoying because if you're now going for conditional access, then you have dynamic and string. This is because the types of the different columns have different property sets, or it's not string and the other is dynamic. So the unified sign-in logs does a bit more than just union, and it's, if we look here and go to load the function code, you will see I just took everything that has either dynamic or string or something like that and put it in the correct naming convention and then removed everything else that is no longer needed. And as always, if you look at old code of yourself, you think, oh, could have done it so much better because if and is empty can be so much easier solved with a coalesce. But yeah, I don't think that we will go into that today, but it's always the same. If you go back to your own creations a few months later or a year later, it's like, okay, I learned so much in between, and let me do this right this time.
Yeah, but sometimes when you look back in your queries, you're thinking, wow, I was really inspired when I wrote this.
Oh, yes, of course. So that is just basically the ramp up to what I wanted to tell you, because if we have a look at the whole unified sign-in logs, we now have a complete stream of all my sign-ins from non-interactive, from interactive, all together. And if I just get some basic information here over the last 24 hours, you see it's a busy tenant. Everybody's signing in all day. There are still some errors here. And some of those errors, they are really cool because I can see in the result description, okay, access has been blocked due to conditional access policy. For security reasons, user confirmation is required and stuff like that. But a lot of those have a result description that it says other. And that's not really, really helpful. So what I could do is I could use the correlation ID, switch over to the sign-in logs in the UI. And if I see here, then I have a failure reason. And in this case, it's for security reason, user confirmation is required. Okay, I saw that before. Let me get another one. Oh, password change is required. I think the 50142 is something I had no explanation here. But why I don't like to use the UI is not only KQL is so much faster, but what you can see, I have correlation ID here. And if I just filter for this correlation ID, I will get about 5 or 6 results. Oh, it's even 7 in the sign-in logs here. But if I look in the UI, you will only see 3 events, and I have the same correlation ID filtered. So this means if I'm looking at the sign-in data in the UI, in the Entra portal, I will miss about half of the events that actually happened. So from a security perspective, this is, for me, not cool, because I want to have all the events and I want to know what happened. So that is why I have to look always in KQL, because there's all the events there. I can filter this out. So what can I do? Of course, as I said, I can go in there, copy the correlation ID, try to figure it out, and hope that the event is there. But there's another way. I can also just copy this result type and go to the web address login.microsoftonline.com/error. And this is a real neat website for Microsoft. You can just submit your error and you will get a message and sometimes even an explanation on how to remediate the issue. So if it's not like password change is required, which is really easy, change your password, sometimes you will get some more information. So what I did here was, how could I get this information in a more easy, consumable way? Because I don't want to reach out to another website. If I do this work, I want to have it all in one place. So, of course, I wrote a script, because the error website from Microsoft, I can easily query that by PowerShell, and I know which error codes I have no result for, because that's also really easy to do. I can just go for OK, where the result type is unequal 0, and the result description equals other. And then let's do a summarize by result description, and maybe look at the last 90 days. So that would be everything in my tenant. And yeah, not really helpful what I did here. I also have to include the result type, of course, because that's what I'm looking for. And so you can see there are quite a lot of different result types I couldn't resolve. Some have really funny things here. Let's see, what is that? FIDO assertion verification failed. Okay, something with my FIDO key was not correct, and this is the error. Since I'm in the great opportunity to not only have my lab tenant as a source of events, I can also query other data sources as well. I created a list of almost all other events that I could find, put them all in a PowerShell script, and as a result, I created a little repository. It's called Entra ID Error Codes. And in this repository, you will have 2 files, one JSON, one CSV. And there you can see I just listed all the different results codes that did not have any explanation in the conditional access table. And now, since we have this in the open and accessible World Wide Web, we can use this as an external data. So this is that solution. You can see I get my resolved error codes using KQL, and I hope you can just read that. Let me zoom in a bit here. So I go to the GitHub and go to the JSON in that case, because JSON is really easy to parse. CSV is also easy to parse, but I wanted to do the JSON. I have my code and my message. Then I look at, again, the unified sign-in logs, where the result type not equal 0. And then I do a lookup on the result code, the resolved error codes, and I match it on the result type. So the code from the data I got here, I match this with the result type. And now we have the same query as before. And I have now the result description down here. I did the same here. So I checked if the result description is other, and if it's not empty, then I put the message here. Again, I could have done that with coalesce. But in the end, now I have a good explanation for each of my non-successful sign-ins, and I don't have to go to any website. I don't have to go to a UI that might be unreliable because it's missing some information. But I now have to reach out to a repository of Fabian, and he might change stuff in the future, and it's not there anymore. We don't know what might happen. So the next stuff was, okay, let's see how we can integrate this a bit more cleanly in our Sentinel infrastructure. And every time you want to integrate something in your Sentinel, and it's more or less structured and sometimes changing but not ever changing list of data, then watch lists come to mind. So I just created a watch list, and in this watch list I included all this data as well. So if we just ran this code here, you will see same stuff. We have funny error IDs like QR code sign-in is disabled via user credential policy. Never knew that we have something like QR code sign-in, but it can be disabled. And since we now have this in a watch list, we can easily integrate it in our query as well. So I do again the lookup, search for any data that might be there in my watch list. In that case, I use the search key to make that faster. So try to avoid searching for other stuff like the search key. So I could go for the result type because it's the same. But if you do that, the whole watch list has to be enumerated every time. And this can be really slow. So the best thing is to go for the search key. And then again, I replace the result description with either the correct message if I find one, and other if I don't find anything, and project away everything that is now unneeded, and the result is the same. But now I'm in control, and I could even go that far and be like, let's run a little PowerShell script that checks this output every day. And if there's still a result code with a other in there, then go out to this website using PowerShell, get the ID, get the message, and put a new watch list item in my watch list. Then the next time it would be automatically managed for you. So that you don't have to create this watch list all on your own and have to upload that, I also put this in the GitHub repository. So the Azure deploy JSON here, you can download this, and this is an ARM template, and the ARM template controls everything that is needed for the watch list. So there's the watch list itself. It has a name. It's called Entra ID Error Codes. Has all the error codes in there. And if you deploy it, you will just have this data as a watch list in your tenant and in your Sentinel. And if that was way too fast for you, then I'm sorry, but you can also read up all on this in my blog. And there I put in all the ways I tried to figure out the solution. And you can also go down here and click on deploy to Azure. This will immediately put the ARM template in the portal and will ask you nicely where to deploy it, in which Sentinel workspace. And it also has a complete list of everything that is currently in there in a table format. As you can see, there's quite a lot of different error messages. So you might ask yourself, why do we have to go through all this hassle to get this information? And I think Microsoft has decided at one point, okay, those are the most important error messages in the sign-in logs and the non-interactive sign-in logs, and we will only include those, because each time you write something to the log gets bigger, and that's my guess, we're concerned that some error messages get in here and it gets blown up. But maybe it's just that they didn't bother to update some internal lists where everything that is not found is just defaulting to other. Could be. So, any questions from the audience so far?
Not a question, but definitely a super cool solution. Especially how you're basically bringing in the mix. And we briefly touched on that yesterday, on that kind of philosophy, right? That within Sentinel, yes, we have logic apps, and you can do a lot, but especially when it is for the purpose of updating watch lists, etc., making use of a PowerShell script that maybe runs in Azure Automation is probably, first of all, faster and easier to accomplish than having to do with all the for each loops, etc., that you would have to do in a logic app, and especially with such a large data source.
Yeah, and Alex yesterday told me that he has built something really cool for a similar solution. So I wanted to plug his own work here as well. So he built a little PowerShell module that will get this information for you. So in the future, I can just use that module and enrich my own data set here a bit more easy, and don't have to worry about getting this information. And as you can see, this module will also give you the remediation information, something I currently don't include in the data set, but might in the future.
I was carefully thinking about asking you that yesterday, but I thought let's not overdo it. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not a remediation description everywhere, and of course, I mean, this of course openly leads to the question: why doesn't Microsoft include actually the description in the signing logs itself, right, rather than specifying other? That would be definitely interesting to understand where's the decision made for providing a description versus just adding the other comment. Yeah.
Since
so
this data is not really hidden, it's publicly available and really easy to get. So I think it's even meant for this, and Microsoft is themselves promoting this website on their in their Learn docs. So it's nothing like, okay, we tricked Microsoft in giving us the information. No, it's just publicly available, and maybe we have to talk to somebody at the Entra ID team and tell them about this website.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, it's really interesting to see. I mean, nothing to do with KQL, but as we speak about those signing logs and IDs, how many IDs there are. Actually, when I wrote this PowerShell module back in the days, I think it's from 2021, or when did I do this work? Yeah, I was of course curious, because I'm always curious, but I didn't want to kind of DDoS the API, so I carefully added some sleeps in between, but basically I started with 0 and just let the script run for a day to basically see what error codes are available, and some are interestingly sometimes already hinting to maybe features that aren't available yet, but that might come on the horizon. Yeah. So yeah, for the curious people out there, event IDs might reveal stuff that's coming.
Yeah, both that and APIs.
But please now don't run the script, everyone who's watching this, and bombard our Entra ID API. No, super cool. Yeah. And you mentioned that you could also, let's say, update, an entry that had a 0. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? How you would accomplish that?
Yes, I definitely want to do that. So, as we talked about watch lists, let's have a little peek into what I have. Different watch lists here. You can see I have stuff like Entra ID devices. I have high value assets. I have domains, and some of those are really information that is changing on a daily basis. And maybe it's not like you have 5,000 domains, but just a few. And you could edit them, of course, manually through the watchlist edit here. So as you can see, I don't have that many domains associated with my Entra tenant. But I have a few in here. And I have the domain name, and then I have some tags here. And as you will see, there are some named automated enrichment. And the biggest hassle we had internally, and that Thomas Naunheim and I solved through some helper module we wrote for with PowerShell, is we wanted to be able to have a watch list that not only we as the MSSP can edit and upload every day from maybe GitHub or something, but we wanted to be able to give everybody the chance to add a new entry. So if I, as a user, would now go in here and put in KQLCafe.com, and normally, if I just would upload something from my GitHub page, because there's a complete list of domains, then everything would be gone, including this newly entry from my customer. And to avoid this, we established the logic of tags, and we published a little PowerShell module that does not only this, but a bit more. Let me just get that here. So on the PowerShell gallery, if you look for Sentinel, there are a few modules. One is a converter between YAML and ARM from me. And a bit more down here, you have the Sentinel enrichment module. And this module has a few commandlets in there. And one would be the edit set Sentinel Watchlists. So what this does is that you can give it a list of entries you want to put in a watch list, and it will check if the tag that you also provided is there. And if this tag is already associated with one of the entries, it will update the entry. But if it's not there, it will add it. And the best thing is, if there is any entry left at the end of the check that has the tag, but was not in your list that you provided, it will be deleted. So that way you can do a differential update of a watch list using PowerShell without interfering with manually added entries. Of course, if somebody would go in here and also add the tag automated enrichment here, then this would be deleted. So just to show you how this would work, I will add one other here. Let me add one here and show you how in the backend this works. So what I have here is an automation account, the Sentinel automation, and there are a few runbooks in here, and one would be the Entra ID domains. So this is basically just reaching out to the Microsoft Graph and getting all the domains that are out there associated with this tenant and putting this information into the watch list. So down here we have it. You have the edit watch list, and I give all the new watch list items to this commandlet with the information, which is the search key, which is the display name, alias, stuff like that. And I also have the override tags, and I have identifiers. So that way I can say I have to have the tag Entra ID as well as Entra automated enrichment. And only if you find both of them, then you are allowed to delete. So if you have a look here, I would have to add the Entra ID to the KQLCafe as well. So that way it could be deleted, otherwise it would stay there. And now let's run this here. That should take not too long. And while this is running, we build a few of those internally that we didn't share, but one that we shared and that you can download from Thomas Naunheim's website or GitHub for that matter. I will put that in here as well. Is the Workload ID info. And keep that name in mind, Workload Identity Info. I will show you something I think really cool in a minute. Let's see, it's still working here. Give it a minute or two. Working. Let's go out of here. Oh God, good to me.
You should have done the dance before the show.
There it is, completed. So let's have a look at the output. Yeah, you can see signed into Microsoft Graph, created the domains, and then that was it. So it's not very talkative. But if I now go to the watch list domains, and I hope it has updated itself already here. This worked. You can see the one domain that had no tags is still there. So no change here. But the KQLCafe, which I added with both tags that are needed for automatic management, it's gone. So this was deleted because it was not in the list of real domains. And the ones that I added without the tag are unaffected. And that way we can do a differential update of the whole thing. And we not only do this for domains, but as you saw, for devices and other stuff as well. And the workload identity info, this one, that's what we also shared publicly. Let me send the link here in the chat. And this is really a great way, because what we have in here is we query everything in your environment that is either a managed identity, enterprise app registration, service principal, all that stuff. It gets pulled in here. And now you have something that is like the identity info you might already know for users. And now you have it for workload identity. So for users that are not really users because there are no persons. And there's stuff in there like we have the assigned app roles. So you can see there's some cloud security operations center that has quite a lot of permissions to read stuff in my tenant. And whatever do we have here else? My automation account, for that matter. This one also has quite a long list of different API permissions to gather all the information that I want to put in watch lists. And this information you now can use when you query certain other data. And one thing I think it's really cool, Microsoft introduced this a while back, is the ability to query the data from the Azure Graph. It's behind this arc, and then just columns inside of the what is called the brackets. And then you can just query everything that you otherwise would be able to query in the Microsoft Graph. And in that case, I have the authorization resources, and this will give me all the different identities that have permissions within the Azure environment. So on subscriptions, on resource groups, on everything like that. And this information, if we just get everything here, it's missing some parts, because I now have certain names, but I never see which user is really behind this. So this is where the identity info table can be really handy, because now I can just combine the two. So I query the information about who has permissions anywhere in my Azure estate, and then join this with my workload identity info table. For that, I use the principal ID from the Azure RBAC and the search key in the workload identity info. And then I summarize the result based on the app display name, principal ID, role definition, and the role assignment scope. And that way I can see all the different apps and managed identities and everything like that that has permissions within my tenant. So here you would have the CSOC Foundation, and this would have some role definition over this resource group. Or the, where do we have it? Certain other stuff somewhere, the Azure enrichment. So this has certain permissions on my Sentinel core resource group. And if we take a look at what this role group is in the Azure built-in roles, this would be the Sentinel contributor. So that way you can see, okay, this identity has this role on this scope. You can even go a bit further. I have not prepared this in this, but you can also query the role definition to the role name itself within the authorization resources. So this data is all present. And that way you would have a complete report over all your permissions within Azure, like in a few minutes. Of course, my environment is really small. I have just a few subscriptions in here. If you have a larger environment, this can take a bit, and depending on how large it is, there might be an error or two when you execute it. But still, I think it's a really neat way to get this information. And if you wanted to extract this information and maybe put it in a watch list and have some sort of versioning through that, you could definitely do this again with the automation account. So your automation account would run this query, get all the information, and just put it in a watch list. That way, you don't have to run this every time. And the best thing is, Alex and I discussed that, and Jenny as well yesterday, you cannot use the arc command in any analytic rule. But if you put the output of this in a watch list, this you can use in any analytic rule. So that way you can have self-fulfilling watch list that helps your analytic rules do that job. So this could be, oh, somebody has changed something in the permissions, or this and that principal has those permissions and it tried to access something else. All this could be alerting that you can write when you have this information in form of a watch list. And since you don't want to do this manually and update it manually, you should definitely leverage an automation account to do this for you and just update the watch list for you.
Small question. What kind of permissions do you need to fill the watch list?
Oh, so the smallest thing that you could do is a custom role. So you could create a custom role that is only allowed to change watch lists. So when you have a look at the Sentinel responder, which would be the smallest built-in role that you could use, there is certain stuff in here, and there's also, let me see, yeah, it's just the deny for the confidential watch lists, but you could create an action that would be security insight / watch list / star, and that way it would only be allowed to change watch lists, nothing else. Create, delete, everything in that, but that you could do as a custom role. And otherwise, I would recommend using not the Sentinel contributor, that's much too large. The Sentinel responder is the most sensible, because you can change most of the important stuff like watch lists. You could change incidents as well, but you don't have to create a custom role. So least privilege would be create a custom role, put in only security insights watch lists star. Then you could do everything in your watch lists. And if you don't want to do the hassle of creating a custom role, then use the Sentinel responder role.
Great, thank you.
And the nice thing about all this permission stuff is if you, let me get back here to the automation account for a second. If you are using managed identities, which you can enable on the left-hand side, where is the credentials? No, that's wrong. Identity should be client identity. Here it is. So if you enable this identity, then you can use this system assigned identity for the automation account, give that the permission in your Sentinel workspace, and you can use the AZ commandlets and just be like connect AZ / identity, and you don't have to worry about any secret management, all that stuff. Microsoft will do that for you. It's assigned to this particular resource, and if you delete this automation account, then the whole managed identity will also be gone. So that's really good way to manage the whole identity stuff for such a thing. And of course, this will also show up in the workload managed identity. So if we have a look, I already showed it here. So this is exactly that. That's the managed identity of my automation account.
Really cool.
Nice. Creative times.
Definitely. I think the whole Azure automation, PowerShell, and having query data, put it in watch lists and Sentinel, this is really helpful to enrich your whole workflow and automate the part where you have information that you need in Sentinel, but you don't want to do this manually. So one idea you could do with the workload identity watch list is looking for whoever has really high privileged app roles. So if we would be like, okay, if the assigned app roles, as you can see with this, you cannot IntelliSense, and if I don't have IntelliSense, I can't type. has something with directory. So let's see. Where we have it, this one would be very high privileged. This has the role management read-write directory. So with the workload identity info, it's really easy to find any identity that has super high permissions, and you can now take a query that monitors changes to those service principals and alert you if something changes, if somebody is adding a secret or something like that. So I have a few of those examples in my Azure Tech Path information. So there's stuff like, okay, which application read write all or something like that, those really high privileged roles. And there's also a few Azure Sentinel analytic rules that you can use. They currently don't use the workload identity because we didn't have that yet. But in the future, you can just use something like the workload identity info, and you don't have to manually change the analytic rule. It will always stay the same, and you just take the information which application you have to monitor from such a watch list.
Cool. Actually, speaking about roles, a little bit off topic, but roles and permissions. What I noticed is that when you use PIM, and when you would rely on the identity info table, which is provisioned by Defender for Identity in both Sentinel and in Sentinel through the UEBA activation. Exactly. And if you just, get some user and we have useful information about the group memberships and the roles, right? And roles basically, would show if you are a global admin, security operator. However, I noticed that when you use PIM, which we all should use, and you are only eligible, then you cannot really rely on this information. If, for example, you want to say, enrich your incident, is this user a privileged user? Is it a known user? Because that information is then not accurate. Yeah. So that might be one more reason to rather create maybe a watch list the way you do it, to have a static list of, people that have certain privileges rather than relying on the identity info table.
Yeah, that's a big problem that Microsoft is not considering PIM eligible as actual role assigned in that moment. This is not only in the identity info, there it is very prevalent. It's also in conditional access. So if you have a conditional access policy that says everybody in the role of something has to do this and that, as long as they don't PIM, they don't have to do this because they are just eligible.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a big problem. So everything that is assigned roles here, it's not assigned as in assigned PIM roles. And I think one thing that is also often forgotten is that the identity info, you should always query it for the last 14 days, because otherwise it can miss some information. So this is, I think, something that I now have written so many times. I could do a function, but I still write it every time. But it's really important also in analytic rules. So if you create an analytic rule that uses the identity info, the look back time should always be 14 days, and you should restrict the actual amount of time you want to look back in, like the sign-in logs, through additional things in this. Otherwise, identity info is not the whole thing.
Well, they did sort that a bit, because at first it updated every 24 hours, and now it updates every hour. But still, if your identity info is older than your actual event or than your actual query, then you might miss it.
Yeah, if I remember right, speaking about the updates on this table, so as you mentioned, it does a full sync according to the docs or information every 14 days. I personally tend just to always look back 21 days. I don't know. It became a habit. Like, no, better go for sure. And records are actually only updated when the account is touched. So if there's a change on the account, like name, password, whatever, then I mean there's no SLA for it. But I think the ambition is to have it updated within 15 minutes or so to reflect that. Yeah. But yeah,
So
the identity
the oldest
table
record would be
itself.
from the 19th in my identity info.
The identity table itself has, I believe, has its secrets. Also, when you look at the source system, it also depends on what information you want to get. You might want to filter on the full sync Azure Active Directory, so that's in the source system attribute. Yeah. You will see if you type source system, and
I don't have any source systems.
no, I noticed this issue.
No,
yeah.
I think it was just
sometimes you just have to
hybrid.
Okay. I almost wanted to say you work for Glucon Konya. Why do you have an Active Directory?
I'm in security. We have to work with old stuff.
Little sidekick to your boss. Yeah. If he ever listens to this video. Yeah. That's my running gag with him. Okay, cool. Anything more?
Any questions?
Yeah.
Somebody is interested in some stuff or want to see something?
Let me see the chat.
I think it's
Everybody's
leaving.
Yeah, Clive. Well, he's in a different time zone. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if there's no more questions, then I suggest we just move on.
We might have one question coming up.
Did you see typing?
Yes. Anyone found a way to look up the Azure pricing in a similar way?
So you wanted to query the billing of the Sentinel or the Azure pricing as a whole?
That would come from cost management, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Basically, the customer gets a daily email with the consumption, and the pricing from what the script basically contains is static.
Yeah.
And for example, something like data is either dynamically, resolved. It's based in Switzerland North, and so it's potentially the price of Switzerland, so Swiss francs, stuff like this, to look up and consume either in a query as a function or something that, in the background is pulling something and updating, for example, a watch list, or a alternative than just putting something statically in code.
Yeah. And would that be, I guess the answer is yes, for any resource consumption or for specific workloads?
In that matter, it's basically the Sentinel, pricing structure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So from the log analytics workspace.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there, first of all, just as a side note, until now, pricing for Sentinel was always made up of two pieces of cost, right? The log analytics ingestion and ingestion in Sentinel. Now with the unified pricing, this has been simplified. So there's basically one combined price that includes both the ingestion as well as the Sentinel processing. Yeah. I'm not aware of a solution, but that's why I ask if you are looking for a very specific question. I'm now thinking of maybe an old school method, if we can do some website grabbing, and if you can at least hard code the website and the currency, and if that can be retrieved, then depending on how the website looks, or are you showing a solution?
Yes, he is.
Maybe not a solution, but I know that there is the API. So you have the prices.azure.com. It's even publicly available.
Cool.
I thought you have to sign in, but you don't have to.
Forget about my website scraping. Okay. Yeah.
I think that you could somehow get information from here, but I never worked with it, so I couldn't tell. But there's definitely stuff like regions and locations and the product names and stuff like that.
Looks already super promising. Thanks for the hint.
Most likely.
Yeah, and if it's an API, I mean, that could be as easy, even if it's not too much to find, to integrate into a Logic app. Basically, get your log volume and get. Yeah. Speaking about, by the way, about costs and volume, I don't know if I ever already showed that in the last 2 years in the KQLCafe, but just as a little hint. So normally you would look at usage, right? And in usage, there are already a couple of KQL query on Microsoft websites, to calculate what is your daily usage. And then, of course, you can multiply that with the prices you have. What's also interesting, however, if ever you want to prove that, for example, I always use this when the AAT non-interactive signing logs is going crazy, and it really hurts me because I know we spoke about that earlier. Why does that log go crazy or get filled up? You have an employee, he left the company, he was not properly offboarded, so he might still run around with his Office Teams on his mobile phone that's constantly trying to connect. You might have, during COVID, we saw a lot of people signing in with their corporate accounts on any type of device, and then they forgot to sign off there, and that Teams user is still trying to connect. VDI sessions that are lingering around, people that have left the company, etc. Okay, long story. If you want to prove, that cleaning up that actually can also help save costs, have a look at the hidden underlying billable size attribute that you have in every log analytics table, because that will actually allow you, if you, let's do step by step with Fabian, if you will do usage, maybe you first do usage, and then you say data type equals signing logs, where data type equals signing logs. Okay, just for the fun. Okay, again, you have the usage, and you can multiply that, and you get gigabytes, and you can do that per day, and then you would know, okay, you have that. Now, if you would be interested in how much does Fabian's signing actually cost, then he could do signing logs where his name is, and in the background, I'm gonna quickly grab my other piece of code, Sentinel usage. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. And maybe as an example, let me copy that for you, Fabian. Yeah. Okay. Give me a sec, pasting that. So you get the idea. Here is an example, for example, with cloud app logs. So, for example, you're adding a new application like Zendesk or something to your cloud app security, and now you want to understand, how much additional data this is causing. I mean, as long as you stay in Defender, it's not going to cost you $1. But if you now also have the cloud app event synchronized with Sentinel, you might want to know, okay, what does it mean now that we have added, ServiceNow or Zendesk or what do they have, Box and all those third-party apps that you can connect. And now you will basically see exactly the costs per application. And the amount of volume.
Yeah, I think that would be like this one here, where you can now. This won't work, but.
You have to copy the summarized total volume log line 8 below. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that should already give us, because I do a build size. So do the sum, and I just use format bytes.
Okay, yeah.
So it shouldn't be that different.
You're more sophisticated.
But it's not that much of data. So, but I think with my thing, it won't work with the column chart, because I don't have numbers anymore, because I have now gigabytes. So this one is definitely the better one if you want to have a nice chart. So Cloud Admin costing me the most, 1 cent per day.
So now, if you now also get your API, you might even be able to come up with even more detailed costs if needed. Yeah, exactly. Cool.
And now combine this with the current price of Sentinel pay-as-you-go in Korea South, and you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's really nice to have this for like the applications here. That's really helpful to get this information if you have something like the common security log.
Mm-hmm.
So with your allowance, I would use this, because next month in March I'm in the Expert Live in Denmark, and I'm talking about how to get started with Sentinel on a price-conscious way and try to avoid too much cost. So if it's fine with you, I would show this there, because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. No, I use this all the time. When it comes to cost optimization, I mean, this is peanuts, but imagine you're bringing firewall logs.
Yes.
And if you want to show, for example, I mean, this was more an artificial thing, because it doesn't mean we should drop those logs, but just to show, how much does YouTube contribute to your network traffic logs in a corporate. It's amazing. I ran this, against the network firewall logs for a couple of companies, and it's always YouTube, and of course Microsoft with all the downloads that are happening, etc. Great. Yeah. So I forgot to ask a question, but if you end up building a solution that you want to share where you make use of this API, let us know. Yeah. Good. If there's nothing more, let's move on. Thank you, Fabian, for all your insights and for the cool stuff that you shared with the community.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's the second time, I believe, right? So hopefully we see you back soon as well.
If we do it 3 times, then it becomes a tradition. So we can go in a year and a half.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Cool.
Nice.
Okay, Johnny, you prepared something to
Yes.
learn.
Some small things, because in previous shows we discussed the scan operator where you can do amazing things, sort everything, and make sure that if two things happen, then you might want to see it. But it can also be done in a simpler way. So let me switch to my Sentinel. So over here we have the Sentinel environment. Here we have the result types, which Fabian discussed earlier. And you have two result types which differ from the rest. In this case, they are fields. So let's just filter around a bit. Want to see the result type, the description, and then the user principal name, just to make things easy. And in this case, we can see that there was a problem with an external security challenge, and there was an issue with the device authentication. And what I wanted to do is to make sure that if a successful sign-in was followed by a failure, then you might want to return the records. So what we do is we order it by the time generated. You can do it descending, you can do it ascending. Just bear in mind that when we use the previous or the next operator, then that it gets the right row, because sometimes I'm playing around with the data and then I can see, oh wait, I took the wrong item. Because what can happen, for instance, we sort it and then we have the previous results in the previous result type. And now you can see already that we have the previous result from the first item is empty. But the thing is, we should use next. And now if we scroll down, we can see that the last one is empty because there's nothing before that. So keep in mind, if you sort it down the descending, you want to have the next. And if you want to do it ascending, use the previous. So let's go to the next query, because like I said, the empty one, it doesn't make sense to have it in your table because you can't compare it because there was no previous record. So we do where is not empty. You can do tons of things, but the is not empty is usually the easiest to read and the fastest to go with. And then the next step would be to start comparing. So if it is not empty, and then the next step would be failed before, which I add as a column. And if failed before is not previous result 0, then it has failed before. And if it's not failed before, then it's false. So if we scroll down a bit through here, then we can see, okay, so we have this one is true because there was the failed one before that. And then there was a successful here. So this can be a way to just easily compare two values. And the next step would be to just show where failed before equals true. You can use both true and you can also use the typed out version, by the way, because it's in the backend, it's a true false Boolean, but it represents itself as a string. So you can use both. You can even do =1. There are times when you can use =1, but for now, let's use true. In this case, there were 2 records which have a failed item before. And we can also play around a bit because this is not my only account. We can also just see this one. Then you can see there were others. So in this case, this line has, I was playing around with my account this morning, this afternoon, and there you can see, hey, this one, invalid username or password, that's the one we wanted to see. So we had a successful sign-in after invalid username or password, but the other one is a user did not register an authenticator app because I used my test account and I didn't set it up already. So what we can then do is we can go here and we can say, or we can start with it, or we can better end with it. So let's just add it here. Where the ends, result type, where not result type equals 50226. And now we only have the one we actually wanted to see. So this is a way where you can just play around a bit with the data. We can also do let's make it another one.
And you could also check for the time difference, right?
Yes.
So for example, to find out, did the user finally register himself or ignored the message?
Next time generated. So now we have also the time that we can see extend delta equals date time div minutes. There we go. This one is also one which I always mess up. Which do you add first, the previous time or the current time? Well, in this case, it worked out right. So you have the new time and then the old time. And then you can see 1 minute. So what we can now also do is just add where delta equals less than or equal to 5. And we also don't. I think I got the wrong one. Yes. So this is an easy way to just grab the difference between two lines, sorting them by user principal name and then by time generated, because you want to do that. And also bear in mind that descending, ascending thing where you get the previous or the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the fun things to do in Cousteau.
Cool. Yeah, definitely gonna look at that. As I discussed with Johnny and Fabian yesterday, I'm currently working on a query to identify software removals, and I thought I was there, but yeah, apparently software can also do a repair. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So one of my customers, I'm also doing a
Yeah.
detection on device registry and the disabling of Defender. And what happens is if you disable or try to disable Defender, or if something disables Defender, it writes in the registry the disable AV is true. And then what happens is that tamper protection reverts it automatically. But now the problem is sometimes when the AV is disabled and then immediately it gets enabled again, but sometimes the records don't match. So I'm working now on a solution to make sure that I compare it maybe to the Defender, the vulnerability management where you have the AV disabled, or I want to compare it against the tamper protection results, that if tamper protection is activated when it blocks something, that it automatically filters out of the list. but those are fun in Kusto.
Cool, but yeah, definitely useful to take a look at the previous and next roles. Yeah, I remember they were also coming up in the Kusto Detective Agency challenges last year.
Yeah. Then,
Cool.
Go back to you, I guess.
Yeah. So let me see where we are.
So about the temper protection stuff, I wrote something in Kusto quite a while back, so you might want to have a look at this.
Oh, cool.
It's basically looking at everything that tries to temper and tries to disable something, and will alert if somebody is trying to temper. But it's excluding certain things like I think I added group policy and stuff like that. So this is excluded if somebody has configured a wrong group policy, but it will not spam your SOC.
Yeah, cool. So and there are two things, because you have the disable one, but you also have the Spynet indeed, and we also have the enable. Okay, so there are two options. You have the disabled, which can be set to 1, and if you have the enable set to 0, that's also disabling some features. That's looks good. So now I also have homework today.
Good. Okay, yeah, let me briefly explain the use case I had here that ended up in a few KQL lines. So yeah, the objective was a simple one. Monitor changes to local Windows built-in groups. And typically I see people just monitoring the administrators group, but we decided for this customer, we're going to look at all because all of them give great power. Yeah, this customer normally doesn't have local admin rights. They are very restricted. And still, do we have those events? So we want to take a closer look now. Let me quickly bring up the query itself and walk you through briefly what I've done here. So maybe first of all, just for those that happened to have queries created for this in the past, because you might notice that it's no longer working because the schema, I think it's 1.5 years ago, has changed. If we look at the event now where action type is user added to local group, we will see that under the additional fields, we only have the group name, which is built in this case, the name of the group, and the group SIG. If you look at some old code that I just found in my own repo, there used to be also a member SID to be in the additional fields. But at some point, that was removed because now the member SIG has changed to account SIG. So the account SIG here relates to the SID of the user or group that has been added to the local group. Can be any group, can be a local group, can be a domain group, can be an Entra ID group. I get to that in a few seconds. Yeah. When we look further into this event, we also see the initiating process information. And yeah, like Fabian just highlighted, we are, of course, interested in ad hoc additions. So not those that happen through systems management like group policy or anything else that runs a system. Yeah, the objective of this query, either for detection or for threat hunting, is to find our let's call it nicely, users or colleagues that are misusing their temporary local admin rights that they might have received through Windows Labs or Labs, and think, hey, I'm smart, I'm just going to create myself an account. And then, I don't care about they giving me laps, I'm now the boss. Or maybe just some bad habits. Whenever I run this query lately, we see this activity being performed by IT personnel, like adding a bunch of groups, and then we ask, well, if this is so important and you have to do that all the time for every new device that you stage, why don't you tell us we could automate it? So in my environment, let me quickly walk you through the query here. So yeah, we already spoke about identity info and me being paranoid. So I just go for 21 days. And I want to basically have, provided I have Defender for identity. If you don't have that, you would have to cut off that this piece. Also important, if you go to my GitHub repo that's shared here or in KQL search, you will basically find two queries, one for Sentinel and one for Defender. Normally, those two queries that we all try to duplicate are historically for the reason that time generated is log analytics, whereas it's timestamp in Defender. But in this case, it's also important because there are some differences in the identity info table historically when these between Defender and Sentinel. So first, I want to get a table with all the accounts. Then I also wanted to actually get the so-called domain identifiers. So I want to know, what's my domain identifier for my particular Active Directory or for the accounts that I have. And the reason why I do that, because just by the SID, it's not always obvious, is this, well, if you look at the SID, it might be obvious for you to understand, okay, this is from my domain, but pure in KQL, there's no way. So here I basically, identify the domain identifiers by actually looking at those identities in the identity info table. Now I actually get the events. So I'm going to check for all local accounts that were created. Why I am doing that? Well, if I identify a user added to local group, I only get the SID. Now, one objective of this query was also to make the results easy to read, right? Of course, I mean, I could make it as simple as this. Why do all that work, right? And just say, well, here you go, customer, you have your query. I will alert on it, and you just go find and figure out, what happened. No, of course, I want it to be more meaningful. So what I'm trying to do here is, if I'm lucky that account was created in the last 30 days, if that's the case, I will also be able to basically join the user account name based on the SID. Good. Then I actually define here the local groups. Now, in international companies, you cannot rely on administrators or guests because they will have different names in France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, whatsoever. So I want to work with the 6. And then I basically now make my join. So I join on the device event where action type is user added to local group. Okay, I now do a lot of data preparation. I will not go through all the lines here. They are pretty self-explaining, but what you see here is I'm excluding actions from the local system account. So otherwise, I would be overwhelmed. If people use group policy to manage local group memberships, that would generate a lot of events. The same for laps, etc. So we want to exclude those. We really want to understand, human beings or some automation accounts that might be running that are manipulating those local groups and actually bypassing our security guidelines. Good. Here, a lot of account source. So my objective was really to show as a result, okay, when did it happen? On which device did it happen? And then, of course, the account SIT added. That is, the account SIT. If we remember back, this is, the information we get out by default. Now, a SIT doesn't tell me a lot. So I try to also identify, where does the account come from? Is it a local user? Yeah. Or is it an Active Directory user? Yeah. Or is the SID actually related to an Entra ID user? Yeah. Then I want to go further. If it's a local user and the user account was created in the last 30 days, because that's a limitation in Defender, I can only go 30 days back. If you keep your data longer, of course, you can adjust the query. But in this case, I was able to find a local user created event, so I'm also able to show actually, the username that was created. Yeah. Here the same, but in this case, for example, I was unable to identify the username. So all I have is the SIT, but at least that. In Active Directory, I can correlate the username based on the identity info. Yeah. In Entra, I have no possibility, although the user is in the identity info table, but the SID that is in my event doesn't exist in the identity info table because there we don't have any Entra ID 6 stored. The only way to actually translate this is by converting the 6 into an object ID, and that is not possible in KQL, but I highlight it in my blog post. So for example, you could then copy the SIT in here, and then you get a result back of the object ID, but that would have to be some manual thing you would have to do. In KQL, I cannot run like a stick to object ID function. Good. So these are the use cases: local, Active Directory, and basically I do the very same, not only for the user that was actually added, but also for the actor. So the actor is basically, who executed this activity. Yeah. Again, same logic. Did the actor, is it a domain account or is it a local account? In this case, or was it an Entra account? So again, all the enrichment. Yeah, and that's basically the whole magic. But yeah, feel free to run it if you find it useful. Let me know if you find any issues. Let me know as well. Yeah, we've already been able to to go after some cases here where we have seen an unwanted bypassing of security policies because it's not per se the administrators that we see happening, but a lot of remote desktop users group that are being added, which is something companies usually don't want to happen. Good. My next case is, well, not a case, it is more, I happen to actually come across this. So a few days ago, I was, trying to configure my Microsoft Sentinel TAXII connector. Because for a long time, there used to be free TAXII feeds available. But then they stopped working. But recently, a colleague of mine came across a free offering, so I wanted to add those. And I ran into some issues. Actually, the issues were partially human errors. So the issue was with the guy behind the keyboard, partially. Nevertheless, as you can see here from the screenshot, I mean, if you are trying to configure your TAXII connector and you get errors like this, you know, the TAXII connector could not be configured due to an unexpected error.
Alex, we are still seeing your Sentinel instance.
Ah, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. One day we'll invest in a camera guy. Good. So yeah, you know, I configured the TAXII data connector, and all I got was, you know, connector could not be configured, unexpected error. Now, if I then while mining data, I came across this one. So the action, basically, when we configure a data connector, will be in Microsoft Security Insights data connectors write activity. And there I came across the level error and actually, you know, got some more meaningful information about the problems that occurred. So yeah, if ever you're dealing with a TAXII connector, maybe you remember that the actions that you do, or maybe connectors in general, if you want to get to know whether things are working properly with your data connectors, have a look at this operation name value. Good. And then the last one I leave to you, Johnny. We can't hear you yet.
Nice. So everything is working now again. So what this is I was playing around a bit with controlled folder access to see what needed to be excluded or which exclusion need to be added, but also which allowed applications were there. And I found it quite interesting. So let me share here. So this is the first step. If you ever need to set up controlled folder access, you go to you enable it from Intune or from the group policy, and then you start monitoring, and you can monitor it from the Windows event log, or you can monitoring it from the Defender portal. And if you do it from the Defender portal, then it's the query is to query for the action type controlled folder access violation blocked. And we don't per se want to see the system account being blocked. And as you can see over here, I have some applications. In this case, Dropbox wanted to read my music folder. And I was playing around a bit with the GitHub project and with the Flipper Zero firmware, and I was playing around. And every time it blocked something which I needed, then I would go to the Intune and add an exclusion. But the exclusions can also be added from the group policy, or someone else can add them. Or if you don't have the temporal protection enabled, you might also add it from the local system. So what you want to do is every once in a while, look at this guy, the device registry events, and then to this specific key, so the Defender policy manager, and there's a key value which is named allowed applications. And in the allowed applications, you have a list of, well, all the allowed applications. And we do want to see the last record and then sort it a bit so we get all the meaningful data in the beginning. So in my case, I configured it on the 9th of February. And in here, we can see the value and the previous value, so we can see what has been changed. And if you look at the value, registry value, where are you? So in the value data, we have over here a small screen where you can see all the items which are in the list. So if you monitor this this registry key, you can the value you can see if someone modified it. But then what you also want to know is you want to look at the process which changed it. And you also have the initiating process file name, and over here the OM ADM client. That's the Intune, one of the Intune agents. You know that it's more trustful. Well, if there's PowerShell or command line or stuff like that, you might want to create a detection for that. Or during your hunting, you might want to investigate to see what has happened on that specific system. So that's what I was playing around a bit last month.
Quick question is, because policy manager for me always sounds a little bit like Intune-ish.
Yeah.
So if you would modify, I mean, it's cool that we can also now monitor it, but if you modify it via GPO, or if someone would make a local configuration change, would it also end up there in that area?
With a high amount of certainty, I think so, but
Yeah.
I need to validate it.
Yeah, I ask because especially, we come across that a lot nowadays, right? Because in Windows, after 24 years, we're used to HT local machine software policies whatsoever. But now with Intune, things just happen to be sometimes written elsewhere, although the system knows what to do with it as well. And I've noticed a couple of times, I mean, it's like with Config Manager. If you manage Defender with Config Manager, basically the settings seem to pass through, 1 or 2 seconds and end up being written somewhere else. Yeah. So I was just curious when I read Policy Manager, whether that in this case is really related to the final destination where those settings are being written.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely helpful. I mean, in general, all those exclusions are pretty important to monitor, because just tell you a story about things that can go wrong. If people add PowerShell and WinWord to ASR rules exclusions, that's not a good thing. So you might also want to monitor exclusions being added to identify possible human mistakes. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
And then there's also a lot of other cool, fun keys here which you might want to monitor. Also some related to the update rings.
Mm-hmm.
There's some nice
By the
detection.
way, update rings, if you look in device TVM info gathering table,
Yeah.
there, if you want to type that, device TVM info gathering.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you just do a take something, you will find a lot of cool information about, for example, the update rings that devices are in. Yeah, if you go to the additional info.
Yeah, this is the additional info.
Yeah, and there is also ring information. Yeah.
Platform, signature, and engine.
Yeah. So if you happen to manage your Defender updates in a gradual way, if you just search for that, there is still a specific administrative template file that you need to use for that, if you want to do that in that way. But there you can define those rings, and the information, as you can see here, is now also being collected.
Nice.
Good. Yeah, we had a long session today. Yeah. So and still almost everyone is here. That's a good sign. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for disturbing your dinner, your evening time for those that hung out in Europe late with us, and thanks for all the others that stayed around so long. Yeah. Any closing words from you, Johnny or Fabian?
Our guest first.
Yeah, big thank you just for being here today. I had a blast and hope to be back.
Thank
You're
you,
more
Fabian.
than welcome.
Yeah.
I think it was a cool session for all of us, and learned a lot. Nice samples from Fabian. Nice working together with Alex. And also thanks to our guests for watching.
Yeah. Likewise, Johnny. Yeah. See you next time, next month, same time, Tuesday, last of the month, March. And I believe, let me quickly see. We can already tell who we have on the show.
Professor Smoke.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I leave it like this. You should know who that is. If not, you've missed something in KQL. So yeah, stay tuned for Professor Smoke next month, March.
Oh, cool.
As usual on Twitter, LinkedIn, and all the other social media. We'll announce the show well ahead, or just go to Meetup and sign up there. Thank you for being there. Bye bye.
1 second.
Oh yeah.
We had Jael from the KQL Docs team,
Oh cool.
and she asked if anyone has any feedback, then we can always contact her.
Great.
So it's thanks for joining us.
Yeah, maybe a new potential guest. Talk about the KQL docs. Yeah.
Cool. And thanks all for watching.
Okay. Have a
Good
nice
day,
day.
good night. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.